Have you ever said in your podcast, "Hello everyone, it's good to have you all listening. Hey, thanks for sending all your tweets in. Let's ask the listeners." It's great to have all of you listening. In the next few minutes, you're going to find a very powerful word, one of the most powerful words in the English dictionary, that will help you drop all that and really engage one-to-one with your podcast listener. With this podcast, you can learn the skills of the radio industry. I share with you the secrets, the top tips and tricks to unlock your potential and create powerful podcasts.
This is
Radio Skills for Podcasters.
Radio Skills for Podcasters.
With Kevin Field.
Welcome to Radio Skills for Podcasters. The digital revolution and the shift from audience to community. The new model of communication, which podcast is very much a part of. Like podcast, radio isn't a push concept, it's a pull concept. You go and get it when you want it. There are key nuances that you can use from the world of radio in your podcast to grow your audience and potentially make a profit. And one of my pet hates when listening to a podcast is hearing people talk in multiples, as if there are hundreds of people listening at the same time. It's only me and you right now. So it's all about community, not audience anymore. It's about community. But surely that's all about relationships. And to build relationships, you need to use the right language. Social media experts are forever telling us the right way to do things or a better way of doing things. Bloggers are often saying you need to blog in this certain way and do this sort of thing to actually really hit your audience. And the same goes for podcast. So I'm going to share with you the power of a simple word. One of the most powerful words in the English dictionary. That word is you. This week's top tip, we look at the way to help you write a script to time. If you're creating a sponsor tag that needs to last 10 seconds or 20 seconds, or any piece of your content you want to last an exact amount of time, a top tip this week that will help you do that. I'd also like to hear from you. Get in touch. Tell me what you think of this podcast. skills@radioskillsforpodcasters.com. I offer coaching one-to-one. If you'd like some one-to-one coaching, then skills@radioskillsforpodcasters.com. Or you can tweet at radio_skills. Check out the page at Facebook, Radio Skills for Podcasters, after facebook.com. Easy as that. Right, the word you. Did you know that you is one of the most powerful words in the English-speaking world? In communication, it's probably the most powerful word you can use. We start with a different word. That word's audience. It's a great word. And if you look at the etymology of the word, it means to hear. It doesn't mean to listen. When you listen, you're not necessarily hearing. When you hear something, it usually means you've taken it in. See, audience used to be described as a performance in front of a group of people. For example, at a conference, as you're standing up doing a presentation, that is an audience in front of you. Maybe a comedian has an audience in front of them when they're performing on stage. I do food festivals as a food host, and I stand up on stage as the compere and I perform in front of an audience. There's nothing like a live audience experience. It's fantastic. So an audience sees you react. I would argue that today, even though we call it an audience, we don't actually have an audience when it comes to podcast, radio or TV. I think we listen individually. It's a one-to-one medium. A few years back, I was working for the Kent Messenger Group. They own radio stations across Kent in the United Kingdom. And it was a weird experience because I was doing a thing where it wasn't a real radio job of sorts. What I was asked to do is go along to transmitters while they were refitting the telemetry. These were the bits that enabled them not to go to the transmitter when it broke down. They just dial in and fix it, that sort of stuff. I wasn't really doing anything, actually. It was one of these jobs that were amazing. I was getting paid to go with a set of keys and a big logoed vehicle and stand there in a field while these engineers came along and fixed stuff. Now, one such day, I was standing in a field in the middle of Dover, very high up on these sort of cliff edges. And I sat there in the car, big logos over the side. I got out, had a look round, and then I saw this farmer. And he was waving at me. He was in a field, ploughing the field, but he was waving at me. I'm like, what's this guy up to? He comes over to me in his tractor after unhooking the plough and says, "Here, mate, you know that bloke on that radio station you work for?" Clearly, I work for them. Big logo on the side of the vehicle. "Yes," I said. he's a blooming idiot. I said, well, what do you mean he's an idiot? He said, he just said to me, here's a song for everyone. Who's everyone? I'm on my own. Also, he said, keep your texts coming in. And I was like, right, well, I've not texted him. How can I keep texts coming in? Got in his tractor and then said, can you tell him he's an idiot and to not do that again? And he drove off in his tractor. Now, I did ring the presenter. He told me to naff off. But then the next link, he did a link to the farmer. And the farmer waved at me at the tractor and carried on ploughing, which is brilliant. But it was a real classic example of talking to everyone when there was only him listening. Yeah, all right, there was loads of other people listening. Most likely, it was a well-listened to radio station. But the fact is, at that moment, there was only him listening. Imagine if Mike Russell of Music, Radio Creative and New Media Europe, he's listening to a podcast, the same one I'm listening to, in a completely different location at, most likely, a completely different time. Colin Gray, the podcast host, he's listening to the same podcast. Chris Ducker, Duckerscope and Upreneur, he's listening to the same podcast, but we're listening at different times. Each of us will get something different from that podcast, most likely. But we're all listening to it, most likely, on our own. It's an individual experience. So talking to us as all of us, I don't know who else is listening. That's the other thing that makes no sense. But talking to me one-to-one can be very powerful. Someone said to me at New Media Europe when I was there, yeah, but the thing is, I'm thinking about all the other people as well. Maybe I'm not appealing to them. Well, how do you mean? Well, I might be talking to one person, but there's someone else who's got that experience and someone else and someone else and someone else. I said, I know, but if you put your point across properly, they'll get it. It doesn't matter how many people are listening. If they are listening as one, you talk to the one person. So it's not truly an audience, it's a listener. See, by talking to someone one-to-one, you're closing the circle with the listener. One of the big things that people do in interviews with podcasts, they fail to close the circle with the use of you, the singular person. Right? I'll explain what I mean. A New Media Europe podcast, they do this really well. Some others don't do it so well. If you said at the end of the interview, how can the listeners find out more about you? Now have a think about what you're saying there. Because I'm listening to you and then you're suddenly saying, listeners. But there's more people in my car? Who else is in the car with me? There's no one else there. So you're breaking the circle of trust between you, the guest, and the listener. Instead, why not say, how can we find out more information about you? That means I'm still involved. I'm not this inanimate extra object of listener after listener after listener. Do you see what I mean? So close that circle. Keep the circle closed. Keep it tight between you, the listener, and your guest, and it'll pay dividends. How can we find out more information about you? It's a very powerful thing. I don't want to go overboard about it. I mean, you know, there are some presenters on the radio who on purposely say everyone for a giggle, for a laugh and a way they do it in the style. And there are some who are completely oblivious to the fact that, why are you saying everyone? It's just me listening. And you know, there was one man above all that maybe I should talk about, who used the skill of talking one-to-one to the listener. He was the lion who roared when the British Empire needed him. His name was Sir Winston Churchill. One of his chief attributes as a leader was the capability of inspiring people, regardless of seemingly ominous circumstances. People gathered around their radio, back then the wireless, to 5, 6 and many, many more at a time when he came on to deliver his speeches. And if you check out the text of those speeches, he spoke one-to-one with the listener and not one-to-many. Now, in that in itself, there's a powerful reason to speak one-to-one to your listener.
This is Radio Skills for Podcasters.
This week's top tip is really simple. It's a really easy one to use and you use it straight away. If you want to write to time and build a script to time for whatever it is, maybe you've got a sponsor or you want to do some features in your podcast, you want them to last just a set amount of time. It stems from years of writing scripts for radio. On average, we speak about 3 words a second. Therefore, work out the seconds to the time ratio that you can write a script to fit to time. So an example, maybe a 30-second script, which would be 90 words, but you'd reduce it slightly to around 75 or 80 to take account for longer and shorter words. Yeah, it makes sense. And you should hit 30 seconds. Try that out, have fun with it, and write to time, will you? Come on.
Learn the secrets of the radio industry.
Radio skills for podcasters.
I'd love to hear from you if you'd like to get in touch. It is skills@radioskillsforpodcasters.com. Check out the website. The new coaching section tells you all about my coaching services. In other words, if you'd like some one-to-one advice from me about your podcast, then it's available. I do critiques where I take 3 of your podcasts, listen through them, rip them up, put them back together, and then provide you with a critique of what you need to do in your podcast. Now, it's not saying radio's better, ever. It's saying I've got years of award-winning experience of producing and making radio programs. If you want a bit of that, then come and get some. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching too, so I can talk to you on Skype and we can listen through together, and I give you that one-to-one value time from me as your producer. So, skills@radioskillsforpodcasters.com. You can also tweet at radio_skills on Twitter. Next time on Radio Skills for Podcasters, we look at how you can learn the skills of a great storyteller. See you next time.
Find us on Facebook, Google+, Radio Skills for Podcasters.
At radio_skills on Twitter.
Thanks for listening.
www.radioskillsforpodcasters.com.